Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we are working on our first link into Star Trek, bringing that into our Star Wars galaxy here. Um, I know many people have done Star Trek ships and everything else. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring it into the Star Wars galaxy. Now, uh, most of the ships that we're at least we're going to start off with, and they have a bunch of them. So if you're really interested into doing this as a role playing game, please go visit D6 Holocron. They do have a subcategory of crossovers, and they're the ones that actually have these ships up here. I know I've done my own um, in the past, and I've gone kind of back and forth. I think that they do have a really good grasp of everything here. They have everything written off as a Star Trek theme. Okay, so I will take it from there. Anything I wanted to note later, I will change. And you guys see me do this on our Star Wars stuff all the time, or our GI Joe stuff, or whatever. If I have something in here that I think I need to change, especially with the GI Joe when I'm making my own stats, I will add it in there, and we'll explain why as we go along. So, where do we start? Well, where it all started all so many years ago. We'll look at the Constitution. So there are three different types of Constitution, technically four. I'm only going to cover three. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go into the alternate universe uh, enterprise. I'm not going to look into that. What I am going to look at is the three Constitution class ships that we get from the original to the upgrade to the complete refit that we get for the movie series. So, going on from there, I do have this is Decipher's um, role playing game book. And of course, they have a little write up here for the Constitution class. So, the mission for the Constitution class is a multi role deep space exploration cruiser. The Constitution class was able to operate for extended periods of and project a Federation presence further than ever. Armaments allowed the heavy cruiser to operate as a command and control ship, leading task force, if I can only read here this morning, into battle, or to operate independently on patrol duty. Lavish accommodations, at least for the time, allow the Constitution class to perform diplomatic and courier missions, while an abundance of scientific laboratories and personnel make the cruiser a superb exploratory and scientific platform. So that's really the whole big goal. And this does fit very well into our Star Wars galaxy. At the beginning of uh, the New Republic, Mon Mothma, who was the leading chair, essentially, I think she was the elected kind of president or whatever of the New Republic. She had a decree to let's get out there and start exploring again. So she did want a exploratory arm to be able to get out there. So bringing Star Trek into Star Wars really works. And to sit here and say, you know, we can have an explorer corps. Are they going to have a certain type of ship look? Something that will denote that hey, this is their purpose. It's not a overly aggressive force. It is meant to uh, reestablish ties to different worlds and that maybe we've lost and everything else, which really does fit very well into the whole United Federation of Planets mantra. So it is a very interesting way that we could bring this all in together. Now we can always add in the Klingons, the Romulans, the Vulcans, the Dominion, the Gorn, all of them as well. And I'm going to bring something else in here. Uh, scientists today, NASA scientists and everything else, they're looking at our own galaxy. So we're in the Milky Way galaxy, and they are seeing that the Andromeda galaxy is starting to collide with ours. So that doesn't mean that maybe in the wild space area, we don't find a wormhole that takes us through the rough areas and gets us into what we could now establish as our traditional United Federation of Planets Star Trek area, with all the normal beings that we're used to seeing. And you could have kind of a back and forth there. So now we have a wormhole taking kind of from Deep Space Nine that does take us over there, and here we are. Now we've seen a wormhole effect kind of synopsis from the cartoon series of Rebels, where when we get Zeb going to meet the rest of his people from his own homeworld, and they have to kind of use the Force to guide themselves through there. So, it's not saying there's not possibilities. So, and as someone that just loves all these different franchises, I would love to see them all kind of mixed together in a lot of regards. So, bringing this into our D6 universe, okay, so we do have this is an explorer type vessel. It is a capital class. And we do have the length being at 289 meters long. And of course, our height is 130, and our width is 130, and our height is 73. Ship mass is 475,000 metric tons. This is stuff that we don't typically bring into our Star Wars, but because it's all here. So when I'm doing the stats, these are things I'm usually leaving out. I'll do the length. I'll make a capital. I'll do some of that stuff, but I don't get into a lot of this. That's why I'm grabbing it from there. Okay, the reasoning makes more sense because I'm keeping it real basic as far as how we do it in Star Wars. Now, some of the nice things here is they do have an autopilot of 2D+2, so there is the big ship computer to be able to do that. And originally, we have a crew of 203 with a skeleton crew of 20. It means all your rolls are going to have a plus 10 to them in order to get things to operate. We have a passenger count of 28, cargo capacity of 15,000 metric tons, and enough consumables for about 2 years. We do have a warp drive. Now, I'm going to throw this out here. This, I would say, if we're going to bring this in, so let's just kind of add here. We have a warp drive of 3.5, and then we have a standard cruise of 5.001, and then a maximum warp of 5.8. Now, this is where things always get tricky. Okay, looking at the book for the original here in Decipher, they actually. I'm on the wrong page. Okay, so originally we have a warp drive of. Okay, uh, we have a warp of 6, a sustainable warp at 7, and a maximum warp at 8. And then in the refit later on, it'll go from 6, 7, and 8 to a 7, 9, and a 12. And then there's the oddities that they get above and beyond that because we have Scotty in engineering, and we can go. Scotty's always been able to get a little extra out of the engines. So, what I would say is if we're going to do this, and we're going to add this on here, I'm going to say starting off. Now, this is an old ship, so we're going to do a 3X. Well, actually, I think what I'll do is I'll just put it off as the biggest that we can go. Okay. Now, Star Trek always goes up, and Star Wars always goes down. So, keeping in that regard, let's just do a even if we're seeing an 8, um, we'll do an 8x for our backup, and I'll write it in there as a backup. And we also want, um, let's put it at a 3x primary. Now I know that this makes it slow, but work with me on this. And somebody else in one of the other pages I will frequent, which is rpg.org. So if you want to see where I'm getting this idea from, um, I don't like the way that looks. I need a little bit of a space here between my 8x backup and okay. So one of the things I really want to say here is, it's a possibility you could have a warp drive and a hyperdrive at the same time. Warp, when we look at warp drive, it's going slower, okay, and the computer can do course corrections and everything else. So we see that being brought up in um, what would it be? Not First Contact, Generations, okay. And I'm sure that stuff was going on, and we're really doing that in Star Wars, anyways. When we're plotting courses, it'll take us out to a certain area, then we're taking turns to go here and to go there. So some of the stuff that was written off later on, as far as trying to track people to say, yep, they're going that direction, that's exactly where they're going. Not necessarily, because if someone's being a little on the sly side, they could always use your warp or hyperdrive, however you want to call it. You could go off in a distance, do a complete turn, like a 90-degree turn, go out somewhere else, and then go back through a different route and then get to somewhere. So you could always lose people, um, and go from there. Okay, so we're going to say it's got an 8x backup and a 3x primary. Now it's a slower, this is an older ship, so we could say that this is during the Clone Wars for exploration that was done at the time. So that makes some sense. We do have a nav computer on here, of course you would. We have a maneuverability of 0D plus 2, and I know I'm always much more gracious when I'm doing my maneuverabilities, so we'll leave that there. Has a space of 7.5. I don't really care for doing the 0.5 stuff all the time. It either goes a full or not at all. So I'll leave this here because this is what they've done, and I'm not going to bash their system. I like having the full numbers. That's just me. At capital scale, it has a hull of 2D plus 1 and shields of 1D. This is very minor in comparison to what we see for a lot of Star Wars stuff. But again, it's an older ship, and as we are trying to figure things out, um, it does make some sort of sense. Our sensors. Now, this is where we should really start seeing really big gains here from the Star Trek side compared to our Star Wars. We do have passive scanning out to 4 kilometers at a plus 1D to our roll, an active scan out to 12 kilometers with a plus 1D plus 2 to our roll, a search out to 15 kilometers with a plus 2D to our roll, and a focus out to 500 meters at a additional 2D plus 2 to our roll when we're using our sensor roll. Okay, and then our weapon systems here. So we do have Tulsa laser banks, and keep in mind they're not even saying that they're up to the phasers yet. So this is laser banks. We have 120 degrees forward ventral. We have one. Fire control is at a 0D plus 1, has a space range here. Firing modes, you can do a standard, a continuous, or a pulse beam. Has a fire rate of 2, meaning that you should be able to fire twice in one round. And it's only doing 2D damage. So really, almost on par with what our TIE fighter is able to do during the Galactic Civil War. Now we have photon torpedo launchers. Um, let's see, we have forward, but are self-guided. So we do have a crew of one for this, which I really wouldn't agree with. Typically, when we see this, we have a crew of like 3 or 4. I'll leave this be, you know, because we want to have fun with this. We don't want to get tied down with all the specifics. Okay, I just want to be able to bring this in and say, we have an old ship here and it's running alongside whatever else. So that works for me. We can just keep it there. Um, let's see. We do have space range in here, ammunition. We have 30 Type 1 photon torpedoes. Spread is 4, damage is 3D. And then we have 2 class beta tractor beams, one in the forward, one in the aft, forward ventral, and then, of course, our aft. And the aft is sitting right above our hangar base, so that way they can help guide in our shuttles. Okay, again, crew of 1 each. And then we have fire control of 0D. We have our space range, which isn't overly big, but it doesn't need to be, as a strength of 2D plus 1. And then we have Class Alpha Tractor Beam, which is on the hangar deck. Oh, okay, well, this is our actual hangar one. And that has a strength of 3D. Now, miscellaneous stuff, we do have crew quarters. We have, saying that we have barracks that can house 180, Spartan quarters for 40, some basic for 28, which is going to be our kind of guest quarters. And then we have expanded quarters for 8 people. We have 1 luxury, 1 unusual, and then we have 23 decks, 140 escape pods, which have a capacity of 4 people each. And this was commissioned by 2245 Earth Reckoning. Now, we could put this anywhere we wanted in our Star Wars universe. If we could look up when the Clone Wars were, so we're saying that should be, 2023, possibly 23 BBY, which would, we could put it back then and say that was the Explorer Corps that they had at the time. And of course, we have to do the Enterprise yet too, the NX-01. So we'll try and get that one in tomorrow, and we'll have to figure out what that's going to be in here as well. So as we do all this, all right. So we have transporters. So this is where things start getting tricky. We don't get transporters in Star Wars. We have it in Star Trek, but not Star Wars. So this would be a thing that you either give or take. And I will say this. Gene Roddenberry himself was never a big one for wanting to have the transporters, but because of budget constraints, he had to have the transporters in order to get people down there to the planet's surface, because he didn't have the funding to always drag out the shuttle. So you could take that in one of 2 ways. Personally, if we're going to bring this into the Star Wars galaxy, I would leave transporters out. Okay, but if you want this to be a true just Star Trek, leave it in there and have fun. So that's the difference here. All right, so complement, we do have 6 shuttlecraft. We have 30 probes, and their source that they're getting it from is Memory Alpha and Memory Beta. That's where they're getting all their information for here. So, which is wonderful. Now let's get over to our next one here. All right, so as we look at the now slightly upgraded, and this is the picture that they have for it. So this would actually be the original movie series. So we have it for 2257 to 2269. Again, it's capital scale. It's 289 meters long. I'm going to quick jostle over here, 289. So they're the same length, which something doesn't quite jive here. I'm going to switch over to another one here if I can. Shoot, there we are. And all right, so this one is actually slightly bigger. So this is, we have a slight, I'll say it's a slight picture issue, but we'll run with it. Okay, um, so the slightly upgraded version, actually the nacelles were changed out a little bit. Otherwise, most of it was left the same, which is why we had the same length. The mass is 4,000 or 493,000 metric tons. We still have our autopilot for 2D plus 2. Our crew has almost doubled. Actually, I think it's a little over double. We do have 430 crew, a skeleton of 43 in order to operate the ship, and we have passengers, which is pretty much doubled as well. So we have passengers of 42. We still have our same cargo capacity of 15,000 metric tons, consumables for 2 years, and of course, then there's our warp drive. So let me slide our ship over a little bit. I would keep the same as what we had before, because we're at 3.5, 5, and 6.5 for 12 hours. So let me kind of just do a little copy and then paste. There we go. All right. So this is still an older ship, so we'll leave it that way. We have our nav computer, which is a yes. Maneuverability is still 0 plus 2. Our space is at 7.5 yet. Our hull is now 2D plus 1, so I think it went up just a hair because it was only 2D before. Now it's 2D plus 1, and our shields are at 1D. It looks like our sensors are about the same, so we are passive scan is at 4 kilometers, active scan is at 12 kilometers, our search is at 15 kilometers, and our focus is at 500 meters. Now, our weapon systems is where we start upgrading this a little bit more. And this is where we start naming our type. We have 2 Type 7 phaser banks, which is what was always written out in the books. We have a 240-degree forward ventral and 180-degree dorsal firing arc. So, crew of 1, fire control is now 1D plus 1, which was upgraded from what we had before. We have a fire rate of 3, so we can shoot 3 times in one round. We can do a standard, a continuous, a pulse, or a wide beam. And we have a damage of 2D plus 2. Now we have upgraded photon torpedoes, I believe. So, yep, they're doing the same damage what we had before. So it's the same photon torpedoes, although it's upgraded phasers. So we do have fire control of 1D plus 1, which is an increase from what we had before. We are now carrying 40 Type 1 photon torpedoes. Oh, my tongue is just having problems today. We have a spread of 6, so we can actually shoot more. So that was upgraded, but we're still roughly the older style photon torpedoes. And it's doing 3D damage. And then we have our tractor beams. We have our forward and aft, and then our hangar deck tractor beam here, which are all pretty much the same. Crew quarters. So we do have barracks for 300. We have Spartan for 80. We have basic for 60 and expanded for 15, which I believe would be most of, or some of our. No, I think we had the basic last time for our guest quarters. All right, and we're seeing we have 23 decks. We have 1 luxury suite and 1 unusual suite. So if you have someone that needs some special needs or whatever, different environmental settings or whatever, when they actually are in their quarters, we have that available. Now we do have 140 escape pods yet. Capacity is 4 personnel in each one, and this was commissioned roughly about 2257 and 2261 by Earth Reckoning. And of course, we have our transporters here. So, and I didn't cover it in great detail, but we have 1 personnel, 2 emergency, and 2 cargo. So really, we're very limited as far as how many transporter pads we have. And this is for a 6-person capacity in our primary transporter. Uh, let's see, and all this is coming from, again, memory alpha and then memory beta. So, not bad. And, after going through the first one, we can kind of speed things up a little bit. Now, let's get to our last refit. So, this should be the movie era, and it is at 304 meters long, which would represent what the movie era was. It did elongate the ship. Now we have an autopilot of 3D, so that's been upgraded. Crew of 500 now, so we have a bigger crew. Passengers of 66, and our cargo capacity is now enlarged to 20,000 metric tons. We do have enough consumables for 3 years, so before we only had 2 years. We're going to slide our picture over a little bit because we're going to add to this because we have a 5.8, a 6.85, and a 7.2 for a warp drive. Now, I would say we're going to add this. So let's kind of go here. Our backup, I would keep at a, let's see. We were at 8 before. I think we'll keep it at 8x. 8x backup. Oops. And we're going to do a 2x primary. Okay. So I think that makes some sense. We've upgraded this, and um, we're going to go a little bit faster with this. Uh, and we do have, that view of things are increasing. Okay. All right. So we do have a nav computer. Maneuverability is 1D. Remember, it was a 0D before. Space is 8, so it has increased. Our hull is now at 3D plus 1, and our shields is 1D. Still not the best kind of attack ship. Okay. It is an exploratory mission vessel in our Star Wars universe. Now, when we get to looking at all the other ships here in the Star Trek universe, I'm sure it's going to be on par. That's why I wanted to start off with this, because so often when we get to like the memory alphas and all the other ones, they're using the Constitution class, and then later on the um, Galaxy class as the basis for everything else. That's why I'm starting here as well. So it just, the simple geekiness of it all. This is what we knew because this is what we always had. They related this towards, some other ship and everything else, but everything else has to be related off of what our original ship did. And this is the only one that we really saw from day to day. Okay, so we do have our nav computer maneuverability, and we covered all that. Our sensors look very similar. So we do have our passive scan for 4 kilometers. Our active scan is 12 kilometers. Our search is 15 kilometers, and our focus is 500 meters. So that's still the same sensor packet. Still very formidable for trying to do all of our science stuff. Not a problem. All right, but we also have our offensive capabilities here have really been upgraded. Now we have 6 Type 7 phaser banks, and these are channeled, in the movie era, they channeled through the engine, so that way it increased the damage capacity. All right, so what we have here is a fire control of 1D plus 1, fire rate of 3, so we can shoot 3 rounds or 3 times in 1 round. We can do that is either a standard, we can do a continuous beam, we can do a pulse beam, or a wide beam. So the implications here, you can either shoot at 3 different vessels or one vessel 3 times. Uh, but remember, because this is the D6 version, that means every time you take your second shot, you're going to lose one die roll, or one die for your roll. You're still going to have the same fire control, but let's just say that you yourself have a 3D for Starship Gunnery, capital scale Starship Gunnery, whatever. Um, so your first shot, you're going to be able to roll 4 dice with a +1. The second shot will be 3 dice with a +1, and the last one will be 2 dice with a +1. So it gets a little harder because you're trying to, things are always in motion. That's really why it's done that way. And we do have damage at 3D +1. So not as powerful as some of these other ships are in the Star Wars galaxy, but the fact that you're shooting multiple times in a round or had that availability makes a big difference. All right, so we do have 6 Type 7 phaser banks, single firing emitters. So here's other ones. And keep in mind, because this is 6 of them, so depending on how things are lining up, you can fire from different, 3 times from different areas. This is at starfighter scale, so this would be our anti-starfighter. So we have a fire control of 1D plus 1. Fire rate is going to be at 3, and damage is at 4D. And there again, if something overlaps, you can maybe hit them with 2 or 3 different banks and 3 times each. So you could really make short work out of smaller craft. Let's see, we have our photon torpedoes. This is our Type 2. We do have fire control of 1D plus 1, so it's still using that same fire control from the computer. Has a spread of 6, so that means that you can have 6 torpedoes going out at one time. We are carrying 120 of them now, and we have damage of 4D. So imagine 4 torpedoes slamming against you, plus all the phaser fire as well. Okay, so we do have the 2 beta class tractor beams. We do have 1 alpha class for our hangar deck, and in our crew stuff. So we have barracks for 360 crew members, Spartan quarters for 80, basic quarters for 60, expanded quarters, which would be like your command staff, for 15. We have luxury for 3 and unusual for 1. And we are at 23 decks yet. We have 140 escape pods for 4 people each. Now, with all this, we suddenly get 4 personnel transporters for 6 people each, 4 emergency transporters for 22 people for a possibility, and 2 cargo transporters, so what they can carry, and they can actually do up to 200 kilograms. So, bringing this into Star Wars, okay, for our final thoughts here. If we were going to bring this into Star Wars, the way I would say that this really needs to be done is you need to go from transporter pad to transporter pad. You need something for it to be able to uncode and put it somewhere. That would make the simplest way of doing it. So now you could eliminate going back and forth. Okay. Um, the worst thought for transporters and everything else is you have to have like anti-transporter fields and everything else, so people don't go into banks and just rob banks. I mean, could you imagine let's say a Nausicaan goes to Ferenginar and just transports into a bank, steals all their stuff, or just transports all the gold pressed latinum out of a bank vault, and then they're gone. I mean, you see where this is going, right? So how do you limit this and go from there? Uh, Star Trek has always had a nicer outlook of the future, but sometimes if you get into seedier areas, that's why I'm throwing out Nausicaans, because there's some of the races that are a little on the gruffer side, might steal, could be a Ferengi for all that matters, but you get the idea. Okay, so we do have room for 6 shuttlecraft, and of course 30 probes. So The other big thing on these are, yes, we can have shuttlecraft, and we will get the shuttlecraft here. The biggest takeaway is these are not big combat vessels that have fighters and everything else. And that's something we don't typically see all that much in Star Trek because they're doing a lot of exploration. So, with that, we're going to do Star Trek for the month as well. So, I don't know how I'm going to do it. We're going to try and get 3 videos out, and I've been trying to contemplate how I'm doing this. I'm thinking that maybe I'll drop something and whatever. We'll try and get a third video out, and we'll just go from there for the month. We will pick this up at some other time after the month, or maybe I'll continue until we finish off what I've got here. But there's other websites where fans are creating this stuff too, and I would really love to bring all that to light. There's a lot of great ideas, things I don't really agree with, but you know what? Just because I don't agree with it doesn't mean it's not a worthwhile idea. There's a lot of people out there. Everybody seems to like a lot of the bigger ships. I've explained my love for having the smaller ships because when I'm running a group around the pool table, and if this is the first time that you're seeing this, I have a pool table that gets used for everything but pool, and that's where we do our gaming. I'd like to keep it for a small group because now I'm forcing the guys that I'm playing with to come up with the solutions for everything. When we tried doing Star Trek in the past, it was always one of those things of we have an engineering core on site on our ship. Let's beam them down to fix whatever the problem is. I'm trying to get them to come up with the solutions so that way they can fix it and go from there. That's why I like the smaller ships. But for everyone that wants the bigger ships, wants to be in command or whatever else the case may be, we're going to hit these and we're going to enjoy it and we're going to have a lot of fun. With that, thanks for visiting. I hope you're having a wonderful day. We'll see you in the next video.